There's been a lot of talk today about President Trump losing patience with Vladimir Putin. But you've just been playing golf with him. Did he seem angry with the Russian leader over the weekend?
Well, angry is probably the wrong word, but impatient, that's for sure. So I came out with an impression that obviously he's the only person who can broker a peace, a ceasefire, because he's the only one that Putin is afraid of, and in that sense respects. And, we were talking a lot about the ceasefire and the frustrations he had that Russia was not committing to it. Because, of course, we're in a situation whereby the US has proposed a full ceasefire, now a partial one. Ukraine has accepted it and Europe has backed it. And there's only one country which is putting on new conditions, typical Russian. So, yes, there was a combination of impatience and a tad of frustration.
So is it fair to say there's a kind of penny dropping in his mind that Putin isn't quite as trustworthy as he might have thought?
Well, I think, if there was a pendulum of trust and distrust, certainly Russian activity in the past few weeks has proven that we're moving more towards the distrust side of things.
But if you listen to the president later after your game of golf, talking to reporters on his plane, he says, I don't think Putin's going to go back on his word. You're talking about Putin. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. So he still seems to be believing he's a man of his word. As Finns, presumably you have a different viewpoint of the Russian leader. He's not to be trusted, is he?
Well, I do think, first of all, that the President of the United States is a very skillful negotiator. And he's trying to find the right balance. And it's always about a balance. But I would be very distrustful. And my message to President Trump when he asked, can I trust Putin, was, no, you can't.
What did he say in return?
Well, we'll leave those things out on the golf course.
Sure, but do you think, are you getting the impression from him he's re-evaluating at least the Russian leader?
I'm getting the impression that he's analyzing the situation. And I think he's been very clear from the beginning. He wants to end this war. He wants to stop this killing. So that's why my message was, he's the only one who can do it. And now we need a deadline for the ceasefire. And for me, the deadline would be the 20th of April, when he's been in office for 3 months, and also when we have Easter overall, even in Russia. But that ceasefire must be combined with a really tough stick. And that stick could actually come from Senator Lindsey Graham's proposal with over 50 senators about a colossal package of sanctions. He calls them bone-breaking sanctions. So the basic message being, if Putin doesn't abide by the ceasefire, we're going to increase pressure on the sanctions. I think this is a good balance.
But he was asked about the deadline on the plane as well yesterday, and he said, well, it's a psychological deadline. That sounds pretty nebulous. That's not something that Putin's going to be worried about, is it? A psychological deadline?
I think it's a good start. As we can see, the President Trump, works a lot with deadlines. Right now, it's about deadlines on tariffs on the 2nd of April. And it's good always to have a target towards which you work, because, in our experience, what the Russians do is they just agree psychologically on something. Yes, there's a ceasefire. And then a few minutes after that, they put out a press release. Well, there's a ceasefire, but the conditions for the ceasefire are X, Y, and Z.
Which is why I think viewers will be sceptical. They'll say what they're hearing from Donald Trump, and you're reporting what he's saying, is all talk. This is a president who's not been prepared to put really an ounce of pressure on the Russian leader, but put a huge amount of pressure on Zelensky. He doesn't really mean it.
I disagree with that. I think one of the main priorities of the President of the United States is to get peace in Ukraine, and as a matter of fact, also in the Middle East, and he's working towards that. Of course, his methods are a little bit different from what we are used to in diplomacy. But having said all of that, the war has been going on for 3 years now, and finally we're getting to a point where we're talking about a ceasefire, we're agreeing on ceasefires, we're talking about peace negotiations. I think we need a colossal amount of sanctions on the 20th of April if the Russians don't abide by the ceasefire.
And are you confident that President Trump is going to apply that colossal pressure?
I am fairly confident that he will do that.
Hopeful or confident? Is it going to happen?
More confident than hopeful.
And if it doesn't happen, what happens then?
Then we are faced with a new situation and we try to deal with it. That's what diplomacy is all about.
But what's at stake here? Give us an idea. What happens if that pressure is not applied? What does it mean for Ukraine and for the conflict?
At stake here is, of course, peace. We're all trying to stop the killing. But the bigger picture here is about Ukrainian independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity. And not only that, it's about European security and at the end of the day, a new world order.